We're now going into this other aspect of the experience of being an initiate, which is the second and third degree. And of course, when we are at this stage, we have passed through the second and third initiation. We're now a little bit more hopefully opened to the knowledge and to the training because you just got a second and third degree doesn't mean that you are now the all master and expert on anything. Actually, you just started to experience this second and third degree and how it is the experience. And now it's a new phase. Now it's a new phase that you are, and Lucy's talked to us, right? Doing the first degree, the polarity, and how we need this to really function in every single aspect of the craft, and the female and male polarity between the priest and the priestess. And this is something that is taught to us and also experienced by us. And this is what I really wanted to start the episode today about, is this experience of polarity, and then also the second and third degree that brings this into light as well, since we had done uh, the rites of initiation of the second and third. We're very much acquainted with this, and now our vision of the craft is a little different because we are in a different level aspect of it. I always say this: the more advanced we go, meaning the more we advance in the craft, and this is, of course, second and third degree, the more a servant of the circle we become, because that's what we do. We are servants of the circle. And when I say people have this keenness on using high priest and high priestess very frequently in social media, and presenting, introducing themselves as high priest and high priestess, I always say, well, for me, the high priest and high priestess refers to the work that should be of high quality, not really a rank of any kind. It should be referring to the high quality and expecting high quality of worth and service to the circle by those who call themselves a high priest and high priestess, because it is a ceremonial title. It is used inside of the circle, and that was very important. What was your experience when you arrived in the second and third?
Well, I was taught originally that the Alexandrian witchcraft tradition was a fertility religion, and that our goal was to work together to create energy that served our community, that we were here for health and abundance and safety, security, good food, good water, good air, resources for the community. And I always just think back to older times when communities were very tight and much smaller. People really did work. We know there's a lot of evidence in pre-Christian religions that they would get together at different times of year and work rituals for the land, for the crops, for the animal fertility. The theory is that all those cave paintings were sympathetic magic to help the herds grow so that there was more baby animals to eat. What happened to me in my second and third initiations was the more full example of the energy exchange between the priest and the priestess, because these things are always worked biological male, biological female. And the reason is because those two energy bodies have an electromagnetic aura that circulate in slightly different ways because of the gender for reproductive purposes. And like in tantra and tantric philosophy, you combine those energies and you're going to get not just 1 plus 1, but a much bigger field of energy out of these two polarities working. So I think the third degree for me is an example. It is the same for everyone that goes through it. The full expression and example of the male and female connection and chakras on the body and recognizing the energy field and working together. And for me, I could feel it differently and stronger than just working the altar with a priest. Yes, you can feel it, and yes, it happens. There's many instructions in the Book of Shadows to activate the energy fields around the priesthood, the priestess, and the priest, and how to bring those in unison to generate more magical power. And then that is done in the coven collectively, and we have methods of that so that more and more energy vortex is created that we can send to the family, the community, the earth that we live on. I mean, I always thought of it that way. I never thought of it, and I'm really lucky I didn't have a lot of people around me that were greedy. It wasn't just money magic for themselves or beauty magic or acquire this or get that lover for themselves. I'm real thrilled to say that wasn't so, selfish like that. A lot of our work was to help the community, help others, be of service. But once you go through the 3rd degree particularly, I just think it activates more knowledge of the energy body and self-care of the energy body. We all have our work to do alone in meditation, in good hygiene, in good nutrition, in good psychological health. Because if the priesthood isn't well, their work is not going to be as good. So I
You're
really
right.
thought it was great, a good example of how to really teach physically, teach that 3rd degree, teach the energy bodies and how they interact in more depth. And then after my 3rd degree, I started to be able to use more of that knowledge in the circle with the priesthood, men and women. And then I could sort of show or give an example of how we could build more energy and more power together. And that really helped me a lot because it is another layer. And if you don't learn that part of it, it's just kind of falls flat. You're not really using the extent of the energy and power you could really build up.
It's very important for us to understand power on how power works because this is the whole thing. It's about power and how power works. And how power works is a training. We are trained in power. I've said this many times. Those who are trained in power understand the dynamics of the power that is generated and how it's generated. There's many techniques that we use to generate power between male and female, but this is a very important part, if not one of the biggest parts of how we lean on into those techniques so that we can activate the power and generate power. And that is part of our training. And it is absolutely essential to understand how these things work. And of course, the 2nd and 3rd degree gives you, or when you're a 3rd degree, gives you that perspective. And I think it is about perspective. It's not that you haven't experienced it before in the 1st degree. Of course you did. But it is a further understanding. It is a further realization of how this works. And 4th degrees that are there for at least 3 years will understand. And that I think that that's the only thing that I regret. I got it after, but the only thing that I regret actually about being a year and a half in this 1st degree and then go right to the 2nd and 3rd and not have stayed more time, it's because of this, of the maturing of this experience of the power between the priest and the priestess, which is something that comes with experience, of course, and how we understand ourselves. Because it's not about really technique. That can be taught uh, very quick. It really is about you understanding your own self, how you yield that power and that magnetic and that electric, which is required to work this. It really is very important for people to understand that it's not really about the training on how to, it's the training on how do I go about it. Because it's about you, it's about your own power and recognizing your own power as a polar power that would then be activated added to, and then all of the things that are in sequence to have that come out and produce this energetic power that it's unique to our tradition. And of course, people ask me a lot of times about this polarity, and when we talk about polarity, all of these things come out. What about transgender people? What about this? What about that? Humans. And I think for me, it's a lack of knowledge. I'm not transgender. I'm not, you know, um, gender fluid. I'm not that. So I don't have that experience. I cannot say. But what I have is my own experience as a gay man, because I am gay. And of course I'm not heterosexual. And people accused us that sometimes they do say that this is a very heteronormative tradition. And they say the same thing about the Gardnerian tradition, etc. But as a gay man, it isn't about my sexuality, really. It is about recognition of power, of male power in me, in my case, and of female power in priestesses. And this is really what things get very mixed up, because this is what it is about. It's about the recognition of self power, of our own power, and how you recognize that, how you measure that, how you can yield that, how you can direct that, how you can use it productively and in fertility so that you can produce real results. This is the most difficult thing because people don't understand this particular aspect. After the second and third degree, I realized that this was what it was about. It is about really understanding yourself, your own self, to how do you plug in
Right.
into the other and produce that which is what we called magic.
One thing I always really recommend for magical people is to study a form of energy healing. You know, the two main methods used in the West are Reiki or pranic healing. They're both Asian. One is Japanese, one is Chinese. But I studied pranic healing, 30 years ago and through a couple of levels and use it consistently with clients. And I do remote healing, which means my client is going to be laying down at an exact time, breathing and in quiet stillness, not interrupted. And then I'm going to begin to work on their energy body from a distance. And we know what time we're starting, and it's very exact. And I ask them to sort of take note what their experiences are, where they feel things, what visions they have, what emotions come to the surface. And it's really uncanny because I've been doing it a long time now, and I know how to generate power out of my own body. I know how to send energy through time and space. That at the exact moments I may be working in the throat chakra, the person says, "My throat is tight," or I'm crying, or I'm releasing something. I feel it in my throat, or heart, or mid body, or sacral, or sex organ. And I can know that I have the ability to generate energy, send it through space, and have it land where it needs to, and that my client can feel it specifically at the right time, and they can feel the work done. And then so I already knew that, and I think it's great for coven members who wanna bring their energy healing, because Maxine teaches a method of energy healing, and I've seen her teach it in person. She's very gifted with it, and it's a great way to learn to activate your own power, and it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. Obviously, you're gonna do it maybe a little bit differently, but every human has the ability to do this if you're gifted in it. And or learn it. I think there's levels of gifted, just like I'm not the best violin player, it's not my gift. I can still hack out "Mary Had a Little Lamb" on my violin, but it's not great. But I can do good energy healing, and if the women and men in a coven learn this a little bit more and work on it, like through a blind study. Let's all close our eyes and let's let so and so send out energy to so and so's heart chakra. Who felt it? We don't tell who it's being sent to, who felt it. We can get better and better at the sending and receiving energy. Prana. Prana is the life force. And The polarity of the priesthood, that is taught in our lineage and in the Book of Shadows. And I was researching that Gerald Gardner did study Tantra. He studied it in the OTO, he studied it in Asia, he studied it from Crowley a bit, and I think he was really interested in it. And he brought it into the craft, into the modern craft, and it's continuing in the Alexandrian craft. I think it's not taught very much. I don't know a lot of people that know about this as much, but I think it's very much there and it should be utilized and developed because raising power is the point and sending the power, and you can't raise any power if you can't generate any power. And a male and a female body together can generate faster, stronger current, especially when they're trained to do it. That's my experience.
Did you feel this as well? Which is when you got to this point, you had to deal with your own recognition of power, recognizing your own power in a different way. And for you, it's different than for me because you have been doing this for many years before. So it's not really the same as me. Um, Although I have experience of power, but in witchcraft, in traditional witchcraft, which is a different thing. But it is for you, you have been doing this particular thing for many years. So how was it different for you? Did you recognize it differently when you arrived to this point in the
I think it was that I used it for different things. It was magical power that we were generating for magical means. We did a lot of healings. That was useful for me for sure because I felt, really used to that use of the power for healing work. But we also did all kinds of other magics in the community. And of course, for ourselves, we all want to be healthy and happy and successful and thriving people. We do. So the conversion in the beginning, I was sort of shy about it. Like I didn't want to ask for things for myself. Even in my mind, I would do it privately at home, do my own magic for myself all the time. I still do. But in the group, I really struggled with asking for something for myself, but I learned, I said, if you don't practice with this power for a variety of things, for a variety of goals, you won't really master it full spectrum. So I'm an experimenter. I'm a journaler. So whatever magics we would do, I would write down how we did them, how I felt about it, the energy that I thought, and the level of achievement. And then I watched the results. I knew what I worked for. And we would say it out loud what we were working for individually. And like I said, that was hard for me in the beginning, but I got better at it. But I would follow up and kind of ask, "Hey, did that work for you? It's been 3 months. How did that work for you?" And really got to see good information on how things work and the results we got. So for me, it was a change in not just using it for healing, but for using it for many purposes. And then in the Alexandrian tradition, learning that the female power, the divine feminine, and the masculine, the divine masculine. I learned more about that. I researched it more on my own. I was curious about it, and I really felt that brought me a lot of help with the gods, identifying with the gods in a more embodied way. Letting the goddess come into my body was, better because I could open the energy channels. I could vibrate my energy circuit in a new way that could invite the goddess in, I think for more comfortable for her because I could vibrate bigger. I don't know if that makes sense, but I could
Yes,
vibrate bigger.
this is a very interesting journey of self-recognition. You have to recognize first your power. And then after you recognize your power, you need to own it. Because there's a lot of people who do not. They do have the power, they recognize it, and they don't own it. Then you have to own it, and then you'll have to use it. And this is what the craft teaches you. It's to use it for all of those things that you just said and more. And that relies on life and the power of creation. In our tradition, how I was taught is that we rely on that polarity, on that interaction, on that building up, and on that exchange. This is particularly old. This is not a new idea. This was present in the families of the witches of old. This is something that was known by all of the civilizations of the old world. So there is, of course, other ways. There is, of course, other venues and other methods of doing this. This is the one that we're trained in, and this is the one that we use. But I'm sure there's other ways. The attunement with polarity, the male and the female, the universal principle of creation, both of them together, that will come and produce a fertile outcome. This has been done by millennia. It's
First humans learned to do it.
yeah.
I think I had mentioned to you that in the past, and years and years ago, I had guested into a couple of all women groups that called themselves witchcraft. This was back in Florida, and they were lovely people that, set up a beautiful circle with flowers and breads and decorations, and they were very sincere. And it was a lovely, worshipful ritual, but there was no magic. I don't even think they knew there wasn't any magic there. They weren't they were dancing, so they were generating some power, but I'm just saying from my experience, it was very different than working with the male female in the Alexandrian coven experience. And there's a real different energy feeling about it. And I think I'd asked you if you've ever guested into an all male group, and I think you said no, you hadn't seen one. They exist. There are all male witchcraft groups. But I don't know, maybe people could comment on that, but I doubt that would be the same feeling either. You could still generate some power because when I work alone magically, I'm polarizing myself with the earth, so I'm bringing prana or ki through my body from the earth and then out through my hands, in a directed way, and then I'm usually working with God forms that I've asked to come assist or angelic forms that I've asked to come assist, and I'm bringing them in by worship, by prayer, by devotion. And then that combination, the earth energy through myself and the gods or angels coming in is the way I work alone. I don't manufacture a false male. I think some people might not try that, but I never did that. It wasn't an instinct of mine. I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't fantasize a false male every now and then just for some fun, but magically I never tried that. I didn't do it in worship either. Um, but it's really interesting. I always called on male deity when I worked alone, primarily. I added in the females like side notes because I was the female deity. I mean, this is how I felt about it way, way before I was trained Alexandrian. I was just experimenting on my own with magic technologies. Do you think that's weird that I would consider myself the female, the goddess, and then I would pray to the male god form, whatever which one I was using for the thing, the ritual?
I think it's very instinctive and it's very right. It's very correct. You talked about power and, generating power and how we generate power. Anyone can generate power. This is not a secret. You can generate power. A football game generates power. A concert generates power.
Yeah.
The only difference between them and us is that we do it consciously and with a purpose and directing it. So that is the difference. We know how to enhance that with the levels that we need to be touching before we do and during the ritual. The biggest difference is consciousness. It really is. Because power can be generated by so many things. You can generate power by yourself. Absolutely you can. And it could be very powerful, very powerful. But there are ways, there are hidden, that you can, as a person of female or male power, can then activate the opposite, even if they are alone, with the help of other, linking themselves into other anchors. But this is, of course, training that it's not taught in a podcast. So,
Right.
but it's still a very interesting way. This is and has been done by traditional witches from all over the world. They do it in different ways, in different contexts, but they do this, and it works. It does work. So this is the secret behind the lonely witch. How would she or he would do
Well,
this?
they could send their astral body out and and meet with others on the astral, and I mean, maybe we can call that the night flight, you know? Carlos Ginzburg with those witches, those Italian witches that would leave their body and go to war with the evil spirits. And they would all come back into their body, but they would recount the exact same experiences to their fellow living witches as if they'd all seen they did see the same thing. They were all there. They were just working on the astral instead of in the physical. We do that. And I think that's a really interesting way, when you're alone maybe and you have to connect with others. But I think human skills have been dumbed down. I think we were very good at remote viewing and astral travel and looking in the future and in the past. And we've gotten so modern. Time and space are so rigid now. And I really think a lot of modern witches have lost many of those skills, psychic skills, energy skills, power skills. I was going to say to you too, this is a little bit snobby, but one of the things I see a lot are the people who are very much bragging about how great they are and how much they know and how powerful they are and how the rituals are so great. And then you actually work with them and you're like, well, that person is just a big old block of wood. And they don't know that they really aren't generating real power. You don't see it come off their body. You don't see any, as a psychic viewer, you don't see it. It's not really there. They can be loud and robust and have a big pointing finger, but it's empty.
I like that the big pointing finger.
Big pointing finger. But I'm not saying that practice you don't get better with practice. I mean, I certainly have spent probably early years not being as gifted, either, but I kept working at it because I said, "No, I can do better than this. I can get better at this. I'm gonna keep practicing." And I think because of the online quality with witchcraft and the occult today, and that everyone can watch some videos and be part of a group and feel like, "Oh, I am part of the inner thing. I know the real stuff." And it's a great starting point, don't get me wrong, I love the community and the connectivity, but it does not replace the hands-on training that we get in our tradition, male to female, that teach the living energy so that you can feel it, sense it, see it come through the physical form into the circle, then into the temple, and then out into the world around you, and see the energy come off of the body that way.
What was the biggest mistake you think you did as a third degree, as a high priestess so far?
Drank too much wine? Yeah. Well, this has been a growth curve for me. I have a lot of shyness and nervousness, really. People don't believe that because I have a good exterior personality that I've been able to build up, but that is not really the true me. I'm very internal, very shy, um, private, and I struggled a lot with gaining confidence to be powerful and bold and strong, and I struggled to become leadership. I'm glad that I was kind of thrown under the bus in the beginning when I got my 2nd and 3rd to do more leadership work. It was just what was required at the time, and I was not prepared or not sure about it, but I just said, "Well, I'll do my best," and, in the beginning, I think I was very maybe much trying to prove myself or prove that I knew more or other or that I really could do great things, and then I could see that that wasn't always true and that I was still learning and still growing, and I was humbled a bit, but also in that humbling, I became more confident. I was like, "Well, we're all learning and growing. It's okay. You keep showing up and you keep practicing and you keep leading. We're all getting better. We're getting better together." And then that helped me feel more confident. I don't know about big mistakes. I think, yeah, drinking too much wine and maybe forgetting something, but I don't know. What about you? What about your biggest mistakes as a 3rd degree?
I think my biggest mistake as a third degree was um, trusting too much. And
Trusting other people, trusting yourself,
trusting it
trusting
is one of the first things that people taught me actually was do not trust, which and I did a lot. And yeah, I think that was my biggest mistake. It was to trust. But you learn from it. And of course, and it took me a while to really learn because it took me actually until very recently to learn about trust, which is something that is, I'm always the one who absolutely will help, absolutely will open, and absolutely will welcome you with open arms. But then sometimes things are not really what they seem. This happened many times. So I think that that was like really took me a long time to kind of get that. So, but I think that that was my biggest mistake. I think I always done things for love. So I think that that will kind of attenuate a little bit things because I know where my intentions were. Although people sometimes think that that was not my intention, but that was my intention always is love and the love for the craft and for the gods and the circle and the service of the circle. But I think that there's a lot of other things that you think that you are doing correctly and that this is the right thing to do, and then you learn, well, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. I think that the other second big mistake was to be very rigid with rules, because the craft is not really prone to be too rigid. You need rules, and of course, they're there for you to follow because you don't want to commit the same mistakes and not really get into this wheel of mistakes over and over and over again. Things were learned from the past and they were left to us there for us to learn from it and not be. So those are the rules are there because of that, so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over again. But there are certain lessons that only you can learn. And it could be many things. For me, it was trust, but it could be many things from others' experiences. And I think that we all have our lessons to learn, and we all should welcome it with open arms and not be very angry after we commit the same mistake. And so, oh well, we're we're gonna light some more incense and
right,
and
drink a little bit more
I
wine.
have drink a little bit more of wine, have a wonderful dance in circles and celebrate life because this is really what it is about, isn't it, Ellie? Celebrating life.
Celebrating life, celebrating your fellow humans, your friends, your animals, your place. I That's why I've always said I thought the Alexandrian tradition was an example in the Western mystery tradition of a way to do the great work, that you could use the techniques and the Hermetic philosophy and the practices to really work on yourself, to really burn off the dross and get to the gold. And that was my idea about power and ego. There's a lot of struggle with that. As soon as you gain a little bit of power and you've got a little mastery, the ego tends to blow up. And then you've got these people that have all ego and minimal power, and, they are very unbalanced. You can see it in their personalities, you see it in their lifestyle, you see it in their health, their behavior. And then the other side of it is when you really are learning and growing and spending a lot of time and effort on your occult studies and your ego, your magical ego gets strong and your confidence gets big, your everyday ego should come down and be smaller and humble and helping and in service. And you can really see it in a master. This massive magical ego aura is huge, but their personal ego is kind, compassionate, humble, quiet, and they've balanced it in an opposite way. It's not the personal ego that's so big now, it's the magical ego. And I see that a lot. And I think that's a real good personal working point with your great work in the tradition.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned was to contain. the containment of ego, the separate egos, and how you can contain one and can contain the other. They will eventually permeate one another, but it is very evident for me that when people have huge egos in the craft is because they let their mundane ego licking in or taking that magical ego out of the circle into the mundane. So it's really a very interesting work, actually. I think that it's one of the most important works is to understand consciously this particular dynamics, and it is very difficult. I think it's one of the biggest lessons of the high priesthood. Hopefully, their work of consciousness will be high as well, as they are call themselves high priest and high priestess. This is something that really is very important because this is what kills it. This is what really destroys people. It's not controlling their ego and how they blow up and then float away. It's just very difficult because you are a person, you are a human, you're incarnated. So it's difficult to do this. It's difficult to not think that you are the best and you are on the top of the world. Well, you might be now. And you see this very clearly. It's very interesting to watch popes come and go, and you see the ego on them very clearly. It's very interesting
Mhm,
to see
mhm,
the ego. I mean, personalities are different. This is a different matter, but the ego is very interesting. The
mhm.
self-serving ego, and these are dysfunctions. The craft does teach us this, how to, again, it's part of the training. For me, it was very difficult. I was very egotistic. Absolutely, and it was really difficult for me to understand and to have this consciousness. But then I did, and then I began to really understand and really kind of have that consciousness, and it I understood the power that comes from not only the magical ego, but keep them separate and not having that.
Mm.
There's a lot of people that disagree probably with me, but this is very important, I think.
And I love that the third degrees really do help nurture and coach the others in the group for those very reasons to develop the magical ego, to balance the personal ego, to be well, to trust in giant power. But then when you've generated it out of the couple, and then you can bring it back down and ground it and earth it and then rebalance yourselves. And it's nice by the time the circle is over and the ritual is closed down and we're putting our regular clothes back on and we're cleaning up, there's that real sweetness, isn't there? Where everyone is just really happy and balanced and the energy is brought back down. It's very loving. I always find it to be quiet. We're just doing the putting things away and cleaning up, and we're really resting in the really beautiful energy field, and I love to see that too, and that I've seen different all kinds of energy fields at this point by working with different people, but, that's a really great example of a third degree helping to manage that energy field for the group so that it's moderated a bit, not just allowed to be a free for all of energy.